Have you ever stopped to think about how a health event you hear about, maybe a new guideline or something changing locally, how that actually fits into a much bigger pattern, like this unseen web of health data?
Yeah, it's like seeing one piece of a huge puzzle.
Exactly. And today we're doing a deep dive into the field that puts that puzzle together, epidemiology. Our sources call it basically the fundamental science of preventative and social medicine. So our mission today is to unpack what this field really is, where it came from, and maybe most importantly, why understanding it matters for everyone's well-being.
And, while epidemiology might sound a bit intimidating, maybe something just for doctors or scientists, it's really accessible. It helps us make sense of health-related events, states, processes, all these things that impact specific groups of people.
Specified populations, right?
Right. And understanding that is pretty crucial, I think, for you to grasp the bigger health landscape out there.
Okay, so let's unpack this then. Thinking about the very beginning, one source had this kind of imaginative metaphor.
Oh, the Adam and Eve one?
Yeah. That epidemiology began with Adam and Eve trying to figure out the forbidden fruit, which is, a fun way to think about investigation, I guess.
Oh, definitely memorable.
But, okay, looking at the actual words, epidemic itself goes way back, 3rd century BC Greek.
Epimos, logos.
Right. Epi meaning among, demos for people, and logos for study. So literally study among the people.
And it's true, while the word's ancient, the field itself, well, it progressed pretty slowly until the start of the 20th century.
Okay.
But then, wow, the last few decades have seen this really rapid evolution. It's transformed into the science we know now.
And that's where it gets really interesting, I think, how much it's evolved. It started, with outbreaks, obviously.
Sure.
But modern epidemiology, its scope is just huge now. It's way beyond just disease tracking.
Yeah.
Our research shows it covers pretty much all health and health-related stuff happening in populations.
Which means what, exactly?
Well, it means it's key for identifying risk factors for, say, chronic diseases like heart disease or diabetes, and evaluating treatments, health services.
How effective they are.
Exactly. And finding new ways for prevention, treatment, planning, basically making healthcare better and more efficient. It's incredibly broad.
And you really see that breadth in all the newer sort of specializations that have popped up.
Like what?
Well, you've got people focusing just on infectious diseases, others on chronic conditions, clinical epidemiology, serological looking at blood, serum cancer epi, malaria, neuroepi,
Wow.
even genetic epidemiology, occupational health, psychosocial factors. I mean, the list goes on.
Yeah.
And these specialized studies, they've really added a lot to medical knowledge. They let experts dig deep.
Yeah, that makes sense. Given how vast it is, it's probably not surprising that the materials we looked at mentioned there are almost as many definitions of epidemiology as there are epidemiologists.
It can feel that way sometimes.
But back in 1873, Perkin just called it that branch of medical science which treats epidemics. Simple enough.
Right. Very focused.
Then Frost, 1927, the science of the mass phenomena of infectious diseases. Still infectious diseases.
Still focused, yeah.
Greenwood, 1934, broadened it. The study of disease, any disease, as a mass phenomenon.
Getting broader.
And then McMahon, 1960, the study of the distribution and determinants of disease frequency in man.
So, bringing in distribution and determinants.
Exactly. You see the progression. And that leads us to the kind of comprehensive modern definition our sources favor. Can I read it? It's a bit dense, but important.
Go for it.
Okay. The study of the occurrence and distribution of health-related events, states, and processes in specified populations, including the study of the determinants influencing such processes, and the application of this knowledge to control relevant health problems.
Good. Okay, let's break that down a bit for us.
Definitely. So, study here isn't just looking, it's active. Surveillance, observation, screening, testing hypotheses, research experiments, even prediction.
Okay. Active investigation. Right. Then distribution. That's about the patterns.
Yeah.
When, where, who. So analyzing by time. Place could be a neighborhood or global and population subgroups.
Got it.
Determinants. These are the whys. The influencing factors could be geophysical, biological, behavioral, but also social, cultural, economic, political factors.
Yeah.
The underlying causes.
So lots of potential
A
causes.
huge range.
Yeah.
And health-related events, states, and processes. That's the umbrella term. Covers outbreaks, diseases, yes, but also causes of death, behaviors like smoking, environmental stuff, social trends, how well prevention programs work, even how people use healthcare.
Wow. Okay. Very broad.
Very. Specified populations just means, groups with common characteristics, not just random folks.
Right.
And finally, application to control. This makes the goal explicit. It's about using the knowledge to promote, protect, restore health, and, advance science for everyone's benefit.
That really hammers home how the subject has broadened. It's not just epidemics anymore. It's endemic diseases, chronic stuff, accidents, mental health, even studying the health services themselves.
Yeah, exactly. And fundamentally, epidemiology, much like public health, is often more concerned with the well-being of the whole society than maybe just the well-being of single individuals. And this is a really crucial distinction to grasp.
How so? Give us an example, maybe.
Well, think about, say, a pandemic situation. An epidemiologist might recommend something like widespread mask wearing or a vaccination campaign.
Right. Affects everyone.
It affects everyone, even people who might personally feel they're at low risk. But the recommendation is based on protecting the entire community, preventing the health system from being overwhelmed, things like that. That focus on the collective is core to the field.
That's a really important point, thinking about the greater good. So even with all those definitions floating around, our sources seem to agree on 3 core components: disease frequency, distribution, and determinants.
And each tells us something important.
Okay, so first, disease frequency. This is basically about measurement, right?
Yeah.
Counting how often disease or disability or death happens, and summarizing it in rates and ratios, like you hear about prevalence rates, incidence rates, death rates. So what does this all mean in practice?
Well, those rates are absolutely essential for comparing. You compare disease frequency in different populations or subgroups within a population.
And why compare?
Because comparing gives you really important clues about etiology, about the causes of the disease.
Okay.
Finding those clues is often the vital first step before you can even think about developing prevention or control strategies.
Right, like comparing smokers and non-smokers for lung cancer.
Exactly. That comparison was fundamental. And it shows that epidemiology is, in many ways, a quantitative science. It uses biostatistics heavily, not just for disease, but for measuring health needs, how people use healthcare, even things like average blood pressure or cholesterol in a group.
So numbers are key. Then, once you measure how often, the next piece is where and to whom the distribution of disease.
Correct. The basic idea here is that health or disease, it's not just randomly scattered. It happens in patterns.
And epidemiology tries to find those patterns.
Yes, by studying distribution in different subgroups. We look at it by time. Has the disease increased or decreased recently? By place, is it clustered in one area? And by person, does it affect men more than women, or a specific age group? Are the people affected different in some way from those who aren't? This whole process, looking at time, place, person, that's known as descriptive epidemiology.
And that helps form ideas about causes.
Exactly. It helps generate hypotheses, educated guesses about what might be going on.
Which leads perfectly into the third pillar.
Right, the determinants of disease. Our sources really highlight this as a unique feature, maybe the real substance of epidemiology.
I'd agree with that.
This is where you actually test those hypotheses, try to identify the underlying causes, the risk factors.
Yes, this is analytical epidemiology. And it's so critical because the findings directly inform health programs, interventions, policies, making sure they're scientifically sound.
Can you give an example? Sure. The material points specifically to how analytical studies have massively contributed to understanding the determinants of chronic diseases.
Yeah.
We mentioned smoking and lung cancer.
Yeah.
But also understanding risk factors for cardiovascular diseases like cholesterol levels, blood pressure, lifestyle factors. Those links were established through analytical epidemiology.
Okay, so putting it all together, what are the big picture aims of the field? The International Epidemiological Association, the IEA, lists 3 main ones. First, describe the distribution and magnitude of health problems. Basically, map out the issues.
Right. Know your landscape.
Second, identify the etiological factors, the risk factors, the causes.
Find the why.
And third, provide the data needed to plan, implement, and evaluate health services for prevention, control, treatment, and help set priorities.
Use the knowledge effectively. And those aims are achieved generally through those types of studies we mentioned, descriptive, analytical, and sometimes experimental or intervention studies.
And the ultimate goal, the research stresses, is to lead to effective action.
Absolutely. It's not just study for study's sake.
Right. To eliminate or reduce the health problem, or at least its consequences, and ultimately to promote the health and well-being of society as a whole. It has to connect back to making a real-world difference.
Thinking about something like, say, seatbelt laws.
Yeah.
Epidemiologists studied injury patterns in car crashes, identified not wearing seatbelts as a major risk factor, that data supported policy changes, public campaigns, and ultimately led to fewer deaths and serious injuries. That's epidemiology in action.
That's a great example. Now, here's something I think confuses people sometimes, myself included. How does all this population level focus, how does it differ from what my doctor does? Clinical medicine.
Yeah, that's a really common and important question. The fundamental difference lies in the unit of study.
Okay.
In epidemiology, the unit of study is a defined population or a population considered at risk for something.
The whole group.
The whole group. Whereas in clinical medicine, the unit of study is the individual patient, the case, or maybe a few cases. So your doctor is focused on you, your diagnosis, your treatment.
Makes sense.
The epidemiologist, on the other hand, is concerned with the disease patterns in the entire population. And crucially, that includes everyone, both the sick and the healthy, within that population group.
There was a good analogy in our source material for this.
Was it the one about the clinician, the statistician, and the epidemiologist?
Yes. Clinicians focus on the cases, the people with the disease. The statistician focuses on the population the cases come from. But the epidemiologist
is interested in the relationship between the cases and the population, often expressed as a rate, like we discussed.
Right. And their approaches are different, too. You go to the doctor, usually.
The patient comes to the clinic.
But in epidemiology, the investigator often goes out into the community to find people with the disease or people exposed to some risk factor.
It's proactive investigation in the field. Also, think about how they perceive the subject. Clinical medicine deals with the tangible exams, lab reports, the patient right there.
Yeah, very direct.
Epidemiology is often more conceptual. Its findings are often symbolized in tables, graphs, charts, revealing patterns you can't see just by looking at one person.
But, and this seems really important, they aren't opposing forces, right? Clinical medicine and epidemiology.
Not at all. That's a crucial point. They're not antagonistic. In fact, they're deeply interconnected, coexistent, and really mutually helpful.
Oh, so?
Well, think about it. Most epidemiological studies couldn't even get off the ground without good clinical information on how to actually identify and define a case of the disease. You need the clinician's expertise.
Okay, true.
And conversely, the knowledge that comes from epidemiology about how common a disease is, prevalence, what causes it, etiology, what the likely outcome is, prognosis, that information is incredibly valuable to the clinician when they're diagnosing and managing their individual patients and families.
Ah, so the population data helps inform individual care.
Exactly. And the epidemiologist also helps evaluate the outcomes of different prevention strategies or treatments across populations, which then gives vital feedback to health administrators making decisions about public health programs. It's a cycle.
What an incredible field. We've really journeyed from, those almost mythical roots with Adam and Eve.
Yeah.
All the way to these complex modern applications, these different pillars, frequency, distribution, determinants, and its role alongside clinical medicine. It really feels foundational to understanding health on that bigger scale.
It truly is. And looking forward, well, this raises an important question, doesn't it? Given how rapidly epidemiology continues to evolve and its focus on society's well-being, how might the explosion of global data we're seeing now, combined with advanced analytical tools like AI, how might that further transform our ability to promote, protect, and restore health, potentially leading to insights and interventions we can perhaps barely even imagine today?
That's definitely something to think about. As you go about your day, maybe start noticing. What health patterns do you see in your own community or just in the news? Hopefully this deep dive gives you a new lens to look through.